All right, this is part 17 of my series looking at Russ Miller's 50 Facts versus Darwinism in the textbooks. I'm going to get started. We are talking about transitional fossils now, and he's going to discuss the coelacanth. Now, again, a lot of the material that he's going to be covering from here on out is exactly the same material that he covered in an earlier video, not in this series. That I went through. So I'm trying to avoid repeating myself, but I'm going to have to. So I apologize if you've heard this before from me. I don't know what else to say. Skip ahead.
They say they also have the missing link between the fish and the amphibian. They say the lobe-finned fish walked around on the bottom of the ocean until I guess he got bored one day and walked out on land and became an amphibian. It's a nice story.
I'd sure like to know, Russ, whoever said that the lobe-finned fish was walking around on the bottom of the ocean until he got bored. You know you're pulling it out of your ass, right? You douchebag.
They thought that the lobe-finned fish had been extinct for between 30 and 300 million years.
Who was it that said the lobe-finned fish was extinct, Russ? I'd sure like to know what scientist that was, because he's not worth his salt. Considering the fact that the lobe-finned fishes were found alive long before they were ever found as fossils. Do you recognize that fact? The first lobe-finned fishes were found in the 19th century. I know what you're thinking. I know where you're going wrong here, and we'll get to it. I'll get to it later. But lobe-finned fishes include the African lungfish, the South American lungfish, the Australian lungfish. Those are lobe-finned fishes, whether you know it or not. They're dingleberry.
Well, the problems with this are many. Once again, notice that their proof are drawings.
That's right, Russ. Again, back to the drawings. That all of our research is just based on those drawings. Those drawings themselves aren't based on things like, I don't know, fucking fossils.
And even worse, 70 years ago, they found the lobe-finned fish was alive today. Not extinct for 30 to 300 million years. And guess what? He doesn't walk around on the bottom of the ocean. He's a very good swimmer. And if you look at the fossilized version, which we're told is up to 300 million years old, he looks just like the living lobe-finned fish today. I thought things evolved over long periods of time. See, the problems here are many. The fossil record is an embarrassment to evolution. They're constantly saying the fossil record is their friend. That is a lie. That is a total bluff. The fossil record is a total embarrassment to Darwinism. And that's because those layers were laid down in a global flood just a few thousand years ago. We'll cover that when we cover the global flood theory.
See, now we're to the point. The coelacanth was thought to be extinct for 70 million years. The coelacanth is as in one group of lobe-finned fishes. Okay, the lobe-finned fishes were formerly, at least, a very large assemblage of bony fish. Today, the lobe-finned fishes are represented by a group called the dipnoi, which includes the African, Australian, and South American lungfishes, the tetrapodomorphs, which includes, guess what, us, land vertebrates, and the coelacanthomorphs, which were thought to be extinct in the 70s. They also include a few other groups that are extinct, like the ancestors of the tetrapods, in fact, are one of the extinct groups. And I know what you guys are trying to do with the coelacanth story is you're trying to paint this picture of this directional evolutionary chain, in part. That's one of the things one of the attempts that's going on with this. The idea that we thought the coelacanth we thought the coelacanth was extinct because they all walked out of the water and turned into tetrapods. And then we find them alive and we're all embarrassed, like, oh no, how can we explain this away? They were all supposed to have evolved. What are they still doing in the ocean? That's one of the points. The other thing is the living fossil fallacy. But I'm going to go to point number one. First of all, practically nobody, since before the living coelacanth was even discovered, thought coelacanthomorphs had anything to do with tetrapod evolution. Okay, that they differ in significant ways from tetrapods, or the ancestor of tetrapods. Huge differences. Even before we found the living coelacanth, and they found the living coelacanth, it provided us a lot of great information about what primitive lobe fins, if you want to say, sarcopterygians were like. That it was a very valuable find. It was an important find. But we weren't expecting to find our living ancestor. We weren't expecting it to be, wow, this is what, whatever. You're strawmanning the whole concept there with that. And, as has been said by lots of other people, it takes 10 minutes to look it up yourself if you wanted to, which I know you don't. The fact that the modern coelacanth is distantly related to the fossil forms. It is most closely related to, guess what? The ones that were thought to have gone extinct 70 million years ago. That's the modern one is the closest to that group. But the 300 million year old ones are extremely distinct, extremely different from the later coelacanths or the living coelacanths. They were, again, a hugely diverse group. To say that it hasn't evolved shows that you don't understand evolution at all. A point illustrated by this clip.
Well, I wiggle up and I wiggle down. See me twitch, cause I'm a fibbing clown. Shake, 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 baby. Shake your body higher. Shake, 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 baby. You can tell that I'm a liar. Liar, liar, pants on fire, hanging from a telephone wire. Squirming, squirming, pants are burning. When I lie, my hips start turning.
I'm sorry, that wrong clip. I'm sorry, the hair in the preview must have thrown me off.
Transitional fossils are in the eye of the beholder, and never have the transitional links that hit the headlines held up to the following scientific scrutiny. They always disappear a couple of months later, but only after misleading millions of people.
Really, Russ? Is that true? Is it all the transitional fossils are just simply thrown out a few months after they're announced? Is that really true, or are you fucking making stuff up?
Thousands of plants and various types of critters are found entombed in amber. And we're told that this amber is almost 150 million years old. Yet the entombed creatures look just like living kinds today. No evolution is found in the fossil record or in the amber.
What's fucking hilarious, you moronic piece of shit, is the fact that the scientists that actually study this stuff, the real scientists, the people who are dedicating their lives to learning about the world we live in, that you fucking dismiss with your stupid jokes and your idiotic whatever. The people that study these things, I've seen the papers. They publish papers where they debate, is maybe a word. People are publishing back and forth, arguing, discussing whether or not an ant fossil belongs to a known family of ants or whether or not it should be a new family of ants, because the features of the ant in question aren't easy to distinguish. Some of the features, the key features that would let us know whether it belongs to a genus or whether it belongs to a family or whether it belongs to even a suborder aren't necessarily well resolved. Okay, so the people that study these things are actually debating, discussing the features of it. Well, you fucktards can show a picture, put it up on the screen, Haran Yaha style, and then show here's a moth in amber. Look, here's a moth today. Look, they're exactly the same thing. Because you guys know the finer points of entomological taxonomy, right?
Stephen Gould stated, the absence of fossil evidence for the intermediary stages has been a persistent problem for evolution. Well, it's more than a problem. It refutes the whole supposed theory.
More ellipses, Russ? Oh, you guys want me to say more? Okay. I apologize. I thought I could dismiss that one easily. The quote in question, the Gould quote, is referring to, in context, minus the ellipses, is referring to transitions between species, first of all. It's referring to this gradualistic versus saltational approach to how the fossil record looks. Okay, if you read Gould, this is one of his long-standing points and one of his most often quote-mined things. He's not questioning the transitions between major taxonomic groups, which he states in that same fucking paper, you idiot, are abundant.
Another problem that they have is in the lowest layer that contains appreciable amounts of fossils, the Cambrian layer, all of the basic body types are found. They don't know how to explain that, so they call it the Cambrian explosion. All of a sudden, life just exploded. That goes against what they teach, and actually it sounds quite a bit like instantaneous creation to me.
Hey, Russ, I think you missed out on an excellent opportunity for a new and original prime creatard moment. Let me illustrate.
If there was a Cambrian explosion, how come all the starfish aren't spinning the same way?
But seriously, Russ, let me show you something. The Cambrian explosion is not your friend. Well, let's look at what the fossil record actually shows, regardless of your bullshit claims otherwise. The fact of the matter is that there are, today, 36 living phyla of animals. Of those 36 living phyla, which you would call your body plan, ball plan, whatever, 10 appear during the Cambrian explosion. That's 10 out of 36. That's less than 1/3. 5 of the major phyla, in fact, the largest currently existing phyla, in fact, started during the Precambrian. Okay? That's 5 in the Precambrian, 10 in the Cambrian, and then several others are scattered throughout the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, Cenozoic, and 13 phyla have no fossil record whatsoever. So this hardly paints the picture that you want people to believe, that there was this explosion of all of the diversity of life suddenly appears in the fossil record, and that's ignoring, the famous meme about Precambrian bunnies. Now, the situation even gets worse when you start looking at, other eukaryotes. Look at plants and fungi. There is not a single known plant or fungus known before the Ordovician, well after the Cambrian explosion. I thought God made plants first. Why aren't the plants appearing in the Cambrian explosion? Why aren't plants appearing in the Precambrian? Think about it.
Well, back in 1930, they had the same problem that they have today. They didn't have any evidence to support Darwinism. So Richard Goldschmidt came up with the hopeful monster theory, which basically states that there's no evidence because, perhaps reptiles laid eggs and birds popped out, leaving no evidence behind. Well, actually, it had to be a male and a female bird to carry on the species.
Now, I covered Russ's lies about Goldschmidt and the hopeful monster theory in an earlier video series I did, so I'm not going to get into too much detail about it now, but I do want to restate that Goldschmidt didn't base his theory on the lack of fossil evidence. That has nothing to do with it. That is another lie. Goldschmidt based in all of his research basically focused on epigenetics and gypsy moths, and looking at development, looking at how small changes during development lead to major morphological changes in the adult. That's what his research was about, and that's what the hopeful monster theory was about. He wasn't looking at the fossil record. He wasn't a fucking paleontologist, you liar.
Well, folks were laughing at the hopeful monster theory, so about 50 years later, around 1980, Niles Eldridge and Stephen Gould changed hopeful monster slightly and gave it a much better name. It's now called punctuated equilibrium.
Russ, you give me gas. Again, I don't want to keep repeating myself here, but punctuated equilibrium has absolutely nothing to do with Goldschmidt's hopeful monster theory. The only connection between the two concepts, is in the fact that Stephen Jay Gould, who is one of the co-authors of Punctuated Equilibrium, the paper about that, also wrote an article, a pop science article, about Goldschmidt. That's the connection that you fucktards find between the two. There's no other relationship between them. Punctuated Equilibrium is based on the fossil record. Goldschmidt based his hopeful monster theory on genetics, okay, on development, evo-devo stuff, not on the fossil record. And punctuated equilibrium is a way to explain how what you would call microevolution, your microadaptation, how populations within species, in fact, change over time. That's what punctuated is about. It has nothing to do with reptile to bird or reptile to mammal transitions at all.